Yep, thanks for that introduction, Carrie and Mike. And thanks to the award selection committee on behalf of Shelby and myself. I'd like to thank everyone for letting me talk today and learn a little bit about our project. So, just to start off with, our study area. Let's see, I got to get our slide changed there. Okay, our study area is located in northwest Alaska, above the Arctic Circle. This location is a little bit more familiar, maybe to some of you, this week, since President Obama visited Kotzebue last week. It's a little more in everyone's recent memory. Just across the sound from where the president was standing is Cape Krusenstern National Monument. It's one of the 4 Western Arctic parklands, Bering Land Bridge, Kobuk Valley, and Noatak Preserve as well. They're not pictured on my map because I'm shamelessly reusing figures from other presentations. The monument was established by presidential proclamation in 1978, and then in 1980 it was designated in the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act. And in large part, the area was set aside to protect the archaeological resources present there, as well as to protect wildlife and local subsistence use. So the Cape Krusenstern is part of a National Historic Landmark that's over 2 million acres. It extends well beyond the limits of the monument, but the archaeological resources are most densely clustered on the Beach Ridge complex of the Cape proper. So the beach ridges of Cape Krusenstern form a coastal promontory of accreting, coarse clastic gravels. It's just a bunch of gravel beaches all built up onto each other, and then they build up and erode over time. The changing depositional environments and sequences of erosion have made some morphologically distinct segments that are highlighted here with more or less clear boundaries of disconformity. And these segments, the ridges and the segments, allowed archaeologist Lou Giddings in the 50s and 60s to compare the horizontal stratigraphy of Cape Krusenstern with the vertical, what most of us are used to, stratigraphy of Onion Portage, leading to sorting out the history of culture history in Northwest Alaska. Then during Giddings' fieldwork, he was realizing that the oldest sites at Cape Krusenstern were on the lagoon side, toward the north here, and the more recent sites and contemporary hunting camps were on or near the present active shoreline. So the relative ages of archaeological sites roughly follows the geologic sequence. So that's Beach Ridge archaeology in a nutshell. And then what you see in the inset map is just again, shamelessly borrowing, just a teaser of some of our results. You can comparing recently newly recorded features with previously recorded features, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So in the northwest part of the Beach Ridge complex here, you can see from the air, and the ridges are definitely best appreciated from aerial perspective. You can see the parallel ridges on the left meeting up with other parallel ridges coming from a different direction on the right under the strut and the wing. And so that's part of that. Those are Beach Ridge segments and representing different environments of deposition. Similar accretional sequences, like I said, are found around Kotzebue Sound, so all were included in building the culture history of Northwest Alaska. Cape Espenberg, Choris, Sisolak, and Kotzebue Peninsulas. So this isn't unique to Cape Krusenstern, but it is the largest Beach Ridge sequence. So now that you have a general geographic outline, a brief background of our project. Well, after 50 years or so with limited investigation, after Lou Giddings and his student Doug Anderson wrapped up work, Western Arctic archaeologists proposed a renewed study to document and inventory the archaeological resources held at the Cape. The 200 Generations on the Beach of Their Time project was initiated by Bob Gall, Chris Young, and Sabra Gilbert Young. They carried out the initial consultation, and including seeking permission from private landowners that are present at the Cape, and hired a crew for field work in 2006, which included Shelby and myself. We spent 3 weeks surveying and testing and mapping the beach ridges, and that went by really fast. We had a crew of 9, and we covered a lot of ground, and we were all looking forward to continuing the effort next summer. Unfortunately, Chris and Sabra ended up leaving the Park Service later that year. They were the park archaeologists located in Kotzebue. So before they left, they called down to Seattle and offered to us to take over the project, which we readily accepted. So that brings us to the creation of the second part of the project, is the human environmental dynamics at Cape Krusenstern. Bob Gall came down to Seattle in early 2007. We drafted a work plan with help from the Pacific Northwest CESU, and then an agreement was set up. A concurrent CESU agreement was also set up with Jim Jordan at Antioch University for complementary geomorphological research, and so a multidisciplinary project. The Park Service continued to head up the consultation work like Section 106, NAGPRA, and consultation with private landowners, while we provided technical assistance there, reports and face-to-face meetings, etc. Shelby and I took over the day-to-day project management and field work. Then our advisor, Ben Fitzhugh, was supervising us as PI. In 2008, we got back to the field, and then we had crews in 2009 and 2010, paid crews, volunteers, park staff, all helping us out. Formal closure of the CSU agreement occurred in 2012, but of course there's lots to do, and more analyses and publications to come. So since it had been so long since the beach ridges had been studied as a holistic unit, the research goals actually overlap nicely with management goals. Basically, what's out there and where the heck is it? So park managers obviously needed this information to better manage the resources that were there, didn't fully know everything that was out there. And then the research of the 60s, which provided much of the information of the archaeology there, focused on houses and dwelling sites appropriately, because they were trying to build, they had nothing to go on, they're trying to build a culture history. And so they were looking for diagnostic artifacts, and settlements, so they could compare cultures at a time, when they're just trying to figure all this stuff out. So we thought we would add to that research by not only identifying and mapping the resources at the Cape, but also trying to focus on non-dwelling features to supplement the bias and data toward houses and formal structures. So ultimately we wanted to identify patterns of dynamic human and environmental interactions and determine if these are related to late Holocene environmental changes and fluctuations. And from the outset, we really stressed, both Park and the university team stressed community engagement and outreach. So in the field, we conducted some pretty intensive pedestrian survey. We had 10-meter transect spacing, maximum of 40 meters between shovel tests, then additional subjective placement of shovel tests in features like you're looking at here. Shelby's doing the GPS recording while we have some crew members like, oh, that area is grassy. Everything else is beachy tundra. So, oh, well, that's probably archaeological. Let's throw a test in. We continued the use of the mapping grade sub-meter GPS recording, as I said, Shelby's doing right there, and that was initiated in the 2006 season. The data dictionaries we were using with the Trimble software were built for azimuth collection, but based on individual features, since what we're really dealing with here is an archaeological landscape of densely aggregated features. We weren't trying to assign site boundaries while in the field. It would just be impossible. And so it was a feature-based methodology, including the azimuth recording. Then our photos were GPS tagged and annotated. So this was necessarily a very data-heavy, digitally reliant project. We had to have generators out there. We were running computers every night. Lots of technical assistance. And in reality, this project was only feasible after mapping grade sub-meter GPS was available. And so, in previous decades, other attempts to identify and monitor the archaeological resources out there were attempted, but without, driving stakes in the ground can only get you so far. You need some high-resolution GPS mapping in such a crowded and extensive archaeological landscape. So some highlights from our field seasons. 2006 was actually my first field season in Alaska and my first taste of the Arctic summer, and I was always ready to come back. One of my favorite parts of this project was the interdisciplinarity needed, interaction with the geomorphologist, Jim Jordan, working with him in the field and asking him questions. He's a trained archaeologist, but so we could converse with each other. Oftentimes in interdisciplinary projects, you have to you spend a lot of the time talking past each other until you figure out, oh, well, the terms you're using don't mean exactly what the same term I'm using is in my discipline, so working that out. But Jim was great, and Shelby and I asked him a lot of questions about landscape formation and soil processes and all kinds of stuff that, we always think about but don't always have someone there to answer our questions. As time went on, we then were also able to contribute to and collaborate with other projects. You see me sampling a whale bone down in the lower left. That's for a project with Cape Krusenstern on ancient whale DNA. And then we've been submitting samples to a study of marine reservoir effects on radiocarbon dating that's being headed by UAF. So yeah, it was great to just have our work sort of spin out in lots of different directions. I'm guessing I think most of the attendees I see are archaeologists, and I bet you get asked I do, what's the coolest thing you found? And I'll tell you, bright blue beads look pretty cool after, a couple weeks of stones and bones, so that's pretty neat. And then on the right, that panel, you can see that's some crew members on a transect shovel testing with the Giddings and Anderson legacy feature 249 in the foreground, that whale vertebra. And you say, how do you know that it is Giddings and Anderson feature 249? Well, another large part of this project was integrating the legacy data into our research, into our daily field plans, into our analysis. So on a trip to Brown University, the Hafenreffer Museum, to study the existing Krusenstern collections, Doug Anderson found Giddings' original feature map, which is a USGS and or Army, maybe Department of Army photo mosaic from the 50s. And so what you're looking at here is Giddings GIS. The pinpricks on the photo mosaic, and they're pretty accurate. He knew where he was, and it was great. We were very excited to get a hold of this. This is probably familiar to some of you who know the hassle of layers of vellum and transparencies and pinpricked air photos. But for us, it was nice to see a bridge that between our methods and his method. These are just updated from the 60s. Now we do it digitally, but Giddings was using the same sort of system. So yeah, it was important for us to get an idea of what the legacy project had, what they knew, and so we brought this into GIS, and I rubber sheeted it onto the existing ortho imagery, which you can see right here. And then once we were happy with the alignment, locked those down, digitized the point locations, and then added the attribute information, the numbers that are written on the photo, as well as the corresponding information from a numbered card catalog system that was at the Hafenreffer. So what we end up with is full legacy integration into our GIS. It's useful for, in the field, we use it for recognizing features that had already had work done, as well as, for analysis, comparing old and new results. It's not foolproof. There are duplicate numbers and missing, gaps and things, and poor handwriting and things. But this is the best attempt so far. And we got 370 legacy features with a spatial location and attribute information, and then the full legacy database has 318 additional features that we don't have spatial location on. So 700 features that at least we could try to help us figure out what was going on. So that all worked into, this gave us access into additional legacy info. So here, this slide, you see a published map being overlaid onto our GIS data. So we were able to determine 18 legacy locations, compare them this way with maps and other information from Giddings and Anderson 1986 published report. And so you can see here, immensely useful for comparing interpretive results. For instance, you can see we have a bunch more features showing than were on the published map. Again, that's not a critique, just saying that our methods differed, our research questions were different too. But it helps put perspective on why interpretations from the 60s might be something and ours might be a little bit different. So, and as I've mentioned several times, the GIS was really important to managing all this information. The GIS handed over to the Park Service at the end of the project contained what I added up, spatial locations of all the shovel tests, all the excavation units, all the map features, and that's 11,000 distinct recorded objects. And that's not including the raster files, all the base maps, the scanned and rectified legacy maps, things like that. And then we have the things like the artifact catalog and radiocarbon results for the archaeology and for the geomorphology. They're all included and as joined or linked tables that can be spatially queried. Like you see here, you click on a point and you can bring up the information, and then you can click on related tables and say, okay, show me all the radiocarbon dates, show me all the radiocarbon dates in this range. This is old news by now, but I didn't know a lot of people doing this kind of heavy data integration back in 2006. So we were proud that we could manage this amount of digital information and have it produce good results. And so as we're keeping the archaeology information here, the geomorphology information. So the GIS is acting as the repository from different aspects, from different disciplines, and so that's really helping us with the synergistic analyses and helping those to occur more readily. So in the end, we completed a systematic survey for a little bit more than half of the Beech Ridge complex. We did a survey additional areas unsystematically, so not quite 10-meter spacing, 40-meter shovel tests, and we also walked over areas that we determined to be of low archaeological probability, low-lying areas, marshy, swampy, just sort of ground truthing. And then we tested additional areas, surveyed and tested additional areas outside of the Beech Ridge complex, but still on the Cape, like between the bluffs and the river, things like that. We mapped over 2,500 archaeological features, excavated 57 one-by-ones that then provide additional information, controlled stratigraphic contexts for the collected samples. So far we have, this is the latest count, 15 conference presentations, posters, an article in a public periodical, an encyclopedia entry, 2 peer-reviewed articles, and working on more. So stay tuned. And again, so as a comparison here, here's all of our features mapped versus the previously recorded features. And again, not critiquing past work, but helpful for seeing why interpretations might differ, but also more of an indication of what was unknown. Park managers couldn't manage because they didn't know about it, and also features that can help out with research, answer additional questions. So we did realize that we were vastly underestimating the number of archaeological features on this landscape, and so huge implications for past human use of this place, of this coastal site. And again, site flipped out, but throughout this whole project, it was really hard. We stressed that the bounded site construct was really not applicable here, and this because it's just a matter of density, and that sort of broke down into administrative tasks too, like as I mentioned when we were entering azimuth data, and these were all these features were entered as subsites of the existing NHL, and we also had to break it up for submission to the SHPO, and so we bounded it spatially. I mean, they're as discrete as we could get. If we bounded it, I think my first buffer in GIS say, okay, split everything out. It has to be at least 100 meters apart. I think there's 1 or 2 sites included, and okay, 50 meters apart. Well, there's like 12 sites, and so we made some judgment calls, but those are purely administrative, and it's important to remember and to manage this as a cultural landscape, really. So some analytic results. Again, this is, if anything, we're showing the strength of the past research. All we did was almost always congruency with prior work, and just as expected, updates and refinements after 50 years of advances in archaeology and changes in methods and research questions. So we have a more complex occupational history here that challenges some of the assumptions about horizontal stratigraphy and where people should be or do activities, leave archaeological traces. Of course, people today can leave anything across any of the beach ridges. So you have to be careful about cultural attribution just solely based on beach ridge position. We do have periods of erosion at 3,200, 2,000, and 1,000 cal BP, and those are, as prior research showed, correlated with significant culture changes. After 1,000 cal BP, the settlement pattern here is still a little bit unclear. We do see, as was expected, population dispersion, as is known in the area, or maybe a decrease in population at about 500 years ago. But still have some questions to answer there. We've explored some of these topics in recently published articles, and Shelby's included some of the ceramic analyses in her dissertation. She's working on lithic and geochemical analyses with her students at Portland State now. I'm finishing up some zooarchaeological analyses and for my dissertation, and looking at marine paleoenvironmental signals through seal isotopes. So yeah, a lot more to come. I think the biggest takeaway, what I'd like to highlight, is that we were trying to look at periods of environmental and cultural change, moments of disruption, and what we found was nearly continuous occupation of the beach ridges, and it's that really underlined a story of human resiliency despite change. So it was nice. It was a nice sort of lesson to be learned, especially sometimes when you look at what we're facing right now. So we provided Park Service with the GIS and a final report that included management decisions and management concerns and recommendations for them to make the decisions. The usual, muskox burrowing, muskox wallowing, ground squirrel burrowing, things that people in Alaska are used to, but can threaten and destroy archaeological sites. And then we have, of course, human impacts. I think a lot of people may look here, and if you can recognize that that's a snow machine or snowmobile track for you lower 48 people through a hearth, yeah, it's a problem. But also you have to realize that in addition to archaeological resources and to protect the archaeological resources, the monument was also set aside to preserve and promote subsistence resource use by local communities. And so the snow machine is part of daily life here, and so this doesn't mean this isn't just an act of recreation. This could be subsistence, harvest, hunting, visiting. This Cape Krusenstern is part. There's a well-known winter trail that goes along the coast. So yeah, it's complicated, but we were glad to be able to document these so we could know what's going on and hopefully mitigate some of this destruction. And then of course you have, as mentioned in Shelby's talk in the last series, and as in the news frequently, and with President Obama's visit to Alaska, coastal erosion through higher sea levels due to anthropogenic climate change is a problem. But we also have to remember, in this context, we have evidence of erosion and deposition for the past 5,000 years since the beach ridges started to form. And so it's not a surprise that this is a problem. And what we need to know is how to deal with it, and mostly that includes inventorying the features, inventorying the resources, and especially now we have covered some of the coast but not all of it, and I think in recent years Western Arctic Parklands have done additional archaeological surveys in this park and others to help that cause. And then this was a fun one that you don't get to see every day, or Mark and Asmus, the destroyed by previous scientific research. A lot of these old archaeological excavations were not backfilled, which was great because it meant that we could positively identify them. But as sort of a practicing archaeologist today, you're like, oh, why didn't they just backfill them? So that helped make us aware that our own methods and decisions are going to be viewed, 50 years down the road or more, with plenty of hindsight, and so we should be careful and thoughtful in the decisions we're making. And what are we doing that future archaeologists might find a little strange? Yeah. So as I said in the project goals, outreach was a big part of this. From the outset, we really wanted to engage with the local community. This is a list of some, but I'm sure not all of the outreach conducted through the course of this project. It was really rewarding to visit with and get to know community members who spent time out at the Cape, in the country, as they call it. Several families invited us into their homes, shared stories and food. It was great getting to know people. The elders who had lived a lifestyle not unlike that which we were studying. Yeah, it was really awesome, and to try to think about things from a different perspective, as just the sort of the Western scientist. I grew up hunting and fishing and doing some subsistence activities, but not with such a cultural trajectory behind me. So that was really great. We tried to be very dutiful about sharing information back to those landowners and the community at large. We always held public presentations after we came in from the field. Then the following spring, we would have go back to Cotteview, update on results, and that's when we would visit in local schools, speaking to cultural classes, or just telling third graders what archaeology is. We were really glad to host Culture Camp one year, the Sicilic Culture Camp in 2008, and just sort of sharing information about what we do as archaeologists, what information can we get, how does that work with other ways of knowing oral histories and written histories, sharing some technology and things like that. We had fun. I hope the kids had fun. At the very end of the project, we developed a poster with that summarized our results, and then a fact sheet, like a 8.5 by 11 his front and back sheet and had those distributed throughout the community. I was surprised when I showed up to work in Fairbanks a couple of years ago that my fact sheets a stack of them were out for the taking, so that was nice to see. The largest outreach effort was the creation, or specific project was the creation of an education kit or curriculum trunk. So this was based on a program that's run by the Burke Museum at the University of Washington. Teachers can check out a box of natural cultural history and have lessons and materials ready to go and just implement those in their classroom. So we talked with local teachers, and they were expressing a need for more relevant topics and subjects like history and social studies to sort of bring it home for the kids. And we thought, well, we can certainly help with that. We worked with Burke Museum specialists education specialists to develop our research content and results into grade appropriate lessons that would meet educational standards for the state of Alaska. So our kit contains units on archaeology like stratigraphy and dating, and paleoenvironment like botany and geomorphology, cultural lessons on oral history and local culture, and then a summary unit on interdisciplinary research, putting it all together. And so this is all geared toward 8th through 12th grade. And here's some of the things we included, the more or less maybe glamorous parts of camp life, because a lot of those kids do the same things in the summer. You go out to camp, live out in the bush. So yeah, we just thought we'd share our experiences too. So with these education kits, we had hoped to foster not only wide reporting of project results, but also to promote local science, science with a local context, and to increase community interaction. So you see the point in the upper right or upper left, and the pots, the ceramics there. Those are replica artifacts that we had commissioned, and so those are part of it. Not the full pots, we broke them up, but to give an idea what archaeologists find. But they're replicas, but it's hard to tell them apart, and so I think it adds a level of authenticity as well as just tactile. It's nice to hold things in your hand, and it's nice for teachers and for archaeologists. You don't have to worry about kids breaking it because it's brand new. It's not a big deal. So we took a draft of this kit to Kotzebue and Noatak schools for test runs and to get feedbacks from teachers and administrators. And so, this was a big investment of time, and it did require another level of interdisciplinarity. We have the content specialists working with education specialists at a minimum, but then you want to work with the teachers to see what they need, and and it for sure competed with other research goals, because at the same time we're trying to get articles out and get reports out and do finish analyzing, things like that. It works best with, of course, with local buy-in and sustained interest, which is another round. Sometimes it's hard to generate, it's hard to keep momentum going. And then when you do have it going, it doesn't always make it easier, because of course having more opinions weighing in on what you should be doing or what they need, right, complicates things. But we really feel that process helped us make a better and more useful product that will actually get used in the end. So we created 2 kits, mirror images. One stays at the Park Service, and I've been told has been used by park staff for summer camps and things, and then one is available to check out to any of the schools in the borough, and so get put on a plane and shipped out to a village and used. So that was a little bit about our project, a lot in a little bit amount of time. I guess I'll summarize with, in the end, what are some of the lessons we learned here. Of course, the archaeological lessons. We have denser settlement of the coast than we expected. Not sure yet if this is more people at one time, small groups over, a longer period of time, more regularly occupying this space. But regardless, we do have evidence of a really heavily used coastal landscape. And I don't think I mentioned this earlier. Some of having the geologic dates, Jim Jordan getting dates for the Beach Ridge Formation, and then comparing to our archaeological dates, we have evidence that people are occupying these beach ridges much sooner after they formed than we had anticipated too. So in a way, another confirmation of the getting general notion of beach ridge archaeology, that people are striving to be, close to the coast on the active beach. No surprise when you think about just human behavior, but has implications for understanding people's response to, say, storms or weather or settlement strategies. So, yeah, an interesting point. Again, the power of GIS as an interdisciplinary tool, managing data and synergistic analyses and results was really a good takeaway for me. I've been a heavy user of GIS since college, but this really helped me see the applications to archaeology and interdisciplinary research. And then the last thing I'll stress again the importance of our outreach and what we're proud of. We really feel strongly that I know Shelby would echo my statements here. It should be considered part of graduate training to participate in the public presentation of science or of any discipline, really. It's hard sometimes to be the face of your discipline or your park or your university, but it's important that people engage with those who are generating the knowledge. At the same time, I definitely don't want to discount, want to recognize that we often have colleagues who are trained to be that face, to share the knowledge, education staff, interpretive staff, and so to work together with them, can't stress that enough. Get people who know how to get this message out together with the people who are generating the content, and to really make an impact and let people know the importance of parks, the importance of whatever it is you're studying. On a personal level, just getting to know community members was really was a great experience for me. To let them get to know you, important to have respect for the place that you study, especially if you're not a regular part of it. That's really important. So just to make personal connections, and all this, to have a successful project and successful outreach, it involves frequent, repeated community consultations. You need budget. You need money to do this stuff, for travel, to get to these places, to host meetings, to generate media and content. So that has to be done at the front end. You have to recognize that outreach is going to be important, and you have to set aside money for it. So with that, I think I'll get off my little soapbox. I really like to thank again the Cotter Award Selection Committee and those who nominated us. Thanks to, of course, the Park Service, especially Eileen Deviney was our technical rep through all of this, and just a great colleague and advisor through this whole process. Bob Gall for helping us get started in the field, conceiving of this project, and Kristen Sabret for getting it off the ground. Ben and Shelby for their parts of it. I was the cog in the wheel. We all worked on this together. Shelby's, of course, now at Portland State, continuing this type of research, and so that's great. Our field and lab crews, I want to say thank you to. And then the communities, of course, Kotzebue, everyone out at Cape Krusenstern, and then the Northwest Arctic Borough, getting out to villages, letting us in your schools to share our information. I really appreciated that. So I'll thank you guys everyone for your attention, and I think we have time for questions. So I'll let Mike take reins again.
Great. Thanks, Adam. That was great. Fantastic presentation. I have a ton of questions to lead, but actually I'd like to open it up first to the floor if anybody has anything. We have about half an hour or so, or as long as, up to an hour if things get hot. But a lot of fantastic things presented there. Remember to unmute your phone when you have a question and then read it back. Yeah, let's open it up. Anybody?
This is Rhea. I have a question, Adam. You're talking about the education kits. Are these available on the Park Service Education Portal website or anything like that?
So, hey, Rhea. Actually, no. These are like hard physical kits, and they're in Kotzebue. Something we could work on with them would be something like you just suggested, maybe digitizing some of this. I mean, it all, of course, exists in digital copies, so to figure out how and where the best place to post them online so, other people in the region could use it, that would be awesome. So we should talk to, I'm not sure if they still have an education specialist out there, but definitely maybe Linda, Chief of Interp, we can talk to her about that, because I think that'd be really good.
Cool, excellent. I have one question about the public outreach. So it's kind of like, in my experience, I did quite a bit for my PhD as well, and it's always a process that changes as you go through it,
yeah, of course,
the locals, So I mean, you start out with a kind of a matrix and a schedule and a sort of certain amount of resources in terms of time and money, and then I always find it changes, and sometimes it depends, and you have to set yourself limits, but then you find other things that end up being. So I don't know. Could you talk about that process of how you first approach it, and then how your interactions might have changed, either the way you approach the outreach itself, or also approach your own research, fundamentally in terms of the questions you asked or the way that you interpreted the data?
Yeah, I don't recall it. I mean, I don't recall the details of, I'm sure things changed and were adjusted. I would say the first part was, just getting to know people and making those personal connections. But that always started over, because first we met the people who live out there, who are in the field, who who we might see passing by on a four-wheeler on a daily basis, and that was great. But then, you have to meet. You want to go to the schools, so you have to meet some teachers, and then sometimes those teachers leave, and so especially for the education kit, we felt really strongly about that this was the product that we wanted to produce, and we got some buy-in, sometimes more or less, or they'd express interest, but then the teacher would leave, or something else, there was always a wrinkle to sort out, and so that's. And because this was a collaborative effort, we're not part of the park. We're not there all the time and going to be there in perpetuity. It was more discreet. We decided that we recognize that true outreach should be a back and forth, ask the community, or tell the community, this is what we're doing. What would you like to see the results of, or how would you like this presented? And a real dialogue. And for our case, we went to the teachers, said, we would like to produce this. What would be most helpful? And we couldn't just change tack. We didn't have the time or the money to take all ideas into account. We're going to produce this. This is what it's going to look like. You have the ability to help shape it. So that was working around. That was sort of those were some of the changes. But I think, like I mentioned, just keep going back to okay, we haven't heard from this person, in a year or whatever, 6 months, or maybe there's a new superintendent or whatever. But just not getting down, not letting those fits and starts take you down too much, and just say, look, we want to provide this. It's no cost to you. Just help us out a little bit. And I think that persistence paid off for us. I think we got a good product. Could it better fit the needs of the schools? Probably. But again, it's not just for the schools, it's for the park too. So it was sort of the best we could do.
Yeah, it looked like a really cool product.
those artifact replicas, if you haven't had any done, I highly recommend. It was awesome, awesome to play with. This guy, Tim Rast was the producer. He's based in Canada, in Newfoundland, St. John's, I believe, and he has a great website. But he made Thule pottery, and it's great. It's really awesome.
Cool. Any other questions from attendees?
Someone in SEAC has to have a question about this. Come on.
What I'm curious about, what can you tell me?
Okay, I've got another question. You guys still there?
All right.
Okay. I love the legacy data integration and stuff, and I think it's actually kind of a cool. I'm interested in history of the discipline and stuff, so
yeah.
I think it's kind of an amazing exercise too in thinking about methods and other things. And it sounds like overall your appreciation or assessment of Giddens is quite positive.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Can you offer any sort of critiques or let's say new perspectives on your perception of the change in discipline in terms of, like you mentioned a little bit about how interpretations differ and will change the resulting data. Can you just address that a little bit more about how his use of cultural history really changed the way the data that he actually brought up and how you're changing maybe theoretical or technological approaches?
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say we're making theoretical changes or anything. I think if anything, it's a refinement. That those guys got the broad strokes. The broad strokes are right, and the rest is just some details. Some things are still messy. Still we have one. The type site of Old Whaling is the only site of this culture, archaeological culture, that we have. Maybe one in Russia on Wrangel Island, but it's an anomaly. And sometimes people focus on that because it's interesting, because it's different, and we totally avoided it. We were just interested in in the larger, more coherent picture. One thing, Giddens was out there, and later his student Doug Anderson, wrote all this up. And I would say, some of the things that have changed would be maybe interpretations of the ability of zooarchaeological data to add to this. They were my readings of their publications. They're sort of the opinion that it may not be helpful to know what the zooarchaeological data show, because they witnessed, Eskimo camps there. They were hanging out with people, and they're like, well, really, this is just, the last couple days of stuff, and then it's all cleaned out. And so, from ethnographic and, methods, there's like, this, they were well aware of the biases and caveats that may be present in the record, and I think that was built into their interpretation. But now, with methods that we have at our disposal, like I said, I'm working on building a marine paleoenvironmental proxy out of the seal bones from the isotopes there, and so that that's something that they weren't considering, that wasn't on the radar, and so but it's something that we can add to, but yeah, I think I'll end with just Giddens. You saw his pinprick, his markup photos. Sometimes he was wrong, but almost always he was pretty right. Like when I look at the GIS and where we recorded a site and where he put it with a blob of ink, it's just like, all right, yeah, he's good. Like, I don't know if I could have done this. Like it's pretty flat, confusing landscape. You can get sort of turned around. Am I on this beach ridge? Am I on this beach ridge? And yeah, it was just amazing to watch something, an expert, and see the results of that.
Cool. Yeah, really cool. Now, did you consult old field paperwork and stuff like that, or is that stored in
Yeah, we tried to get as much as we could. Like I said, we were only there. We were only made one trip to the museum, and so we were. I don't remember. We recorded as much as we could, like the card catalog. But again, it was like the card catalog wasn't. It wasn't easily interpretable. It was like duplicate numbers and different things, and so it wasn't. It wasn't just to pick it up and like, okay, here we go, we're up and running. But, we had to rebuild a lot of that. Did we? I'm not sure if we had field notes. Shelby would probably remember. I was busy trying to rubber sheet the air photo and write down all those numbers and read the ink, and she was doing things like that. Yeah, but everything we could get our hands on, we used.
Cool.